It's Ash from Super Videos, back for another video for Season 8 of The Walking Dead. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the symbolism in the Red Eye Rick scene. So, if you watched the premiere of Season 8, 801, there was a specific scene that's got people talking and been kind of the focus of discussion after the premiere, after the episode aired. So that's the scene we're going to be taking a look at here. So let's actually start with looking at all of the scenes leading up to that scene with Rick and the Red Eye. So the episode starts with this shot of Rick. His eyes are closed and it looks like he's not in very good shape, and it seems like it's different from anything we kind of see in the other scenes. He is not looking as confident. It looks like he is kind of carrying this pain, this sorrow that we see. So it starts with this shot of Rick with his eyes. Then we get this kind of dream sequence or flash forward sequence, whatever you want to call it at this point. So this means that Rick is basically thinking about this scenario playing out. He's thinking about or dreaming about this scenario. So either he's thinking about what could have happened in the future, he is dreaming this, or it's like a flash forward scene. So then we have Rick's cane, followed by these purple flowers. Now the color of the flowers being purple is interesting because of course purple represents royalty, luxury, and power. So that basically means that whatever is happening at this time period, when we have these flowers being shown, Rick has power, he has luxury, he has everything he's ever wanted, and things are looking very good for him during the apocalypse. Then we have this shot of the clock. So the clock represents time. So it basically gives us a hint or clue that, time has passed. Now the hands on the clock are on 8 and 4, which could mean that something big or interesting or exciting or something is going to happen in the 4th episode of Season 8, 804. 8-4. There's a possibility there. But that's basically it. So going from there, we basically jump into current time or closer to the current time, and we have them preparing for war. And then later on in the episode, we have the same sort of scenes play out. We have Rick with his eyes closed, then we get the cane, the flower, the clock, and then we get this shot of Old Man Rick and his eyes are closed, followed by this shot of Old Man Rick opening his eyes. Now that's interesting because those two shots are followed by these two shots with this Rick who's not in very well shape. Again, the same way as before, his eyes are closed and then he opens his eyes. But this time his eyes are all red and everything. So we can see the difference because in the first one where we had the Old Man Rick, he was peaceful. It seemed like he was happy. But then we have this Rick opening his eyes. He is very distraught and he looks like he just witnessed something very shocking and he went through a traumatic experience. And he definitely looks shaken and he doesn't look like he's in good shape. So it's interesting how they have those flips because we have the peaceful Rick and then the distraught looking Rick. So that's a cool kind of imagery there. So then that's followed by this shot of Rick looking at this stainless glass pane or something like that, and it's kind of hanging, but I don't exactly know what it could represent or what it means. So if anyone knows, let me know in the comment section below. But I'm sure that this has something to do with what Rick witnessed, and there's some sort of connection between what he's looking at and what he just went through and what he just saw. And obviously at this point, it's safe to say that he witnessed someone's death. But it's very interesting. So that's basically everything that's related to the Red Eye Rick scene. And then later on in the episode, we basically get a continuation of that dream sequence or flash forward sequence or whatever, where we have Rick talking to Michonne, Carl shows up, we have Judith, they are all happy and it seems like they've grown as a community. So now we're gonna take a look at the cool imagery that they had making 801 look similar to what happened in 701, where they actually made scenes in 801 kind of mirror scenes in 701. So going back to this image of Rick with his eyes closed. So like I said, this is basically Rick and it seems like he is still shocked a little bit. Now if we go back to 701, 701 started kind of the same way. We have Rick, he has the same kind of look on his face, and he's kind of looking into the distance, and he's shocked, and he's kind of thinking about what just happened, and he can't kind of quite understand what just happened. Now, unlike 801, where Rick had his eyes closed, in 701, his eyes are open. Now, I don't exactly know why they had it that way. It might mean nothing, but I believe there is something there. Let me know what you think this means. But I definitely think that there's something there. So then, taking a look at this shot of Rick in 801, where we have him with his red eyes. Looking back at 701, we had the exact same kind of scene play out at the end of 701, where we have Rick basically looking into the distance at the spot Abe and Glenn were just killed at. And if you remember, he was looking at the walker, basically approaching the site and feasting on whatever was left. So we have the same kind of look on Rick's face in both scenarios. We have a very distraught and broken Rick. So that could potentially mean that Rick is going to lose someone close again, and maybe even as close to him as Glenn, maybe even closer, and it's going to change him and have a big impact on him going forward. And then going from there, we had the dream sequences or the flash forward sequences with Judith and Michonne and everything, and we basically followed up with them as they began to walk outside the house and look at the community. The same way in 701, we had a similar scene play out where we had Rick think about what could have happened if Abe and Glenn were still alive. And we can kind of see that these two things mirror each other. Now, unlike 701, where Rick was actually thinking about something that could have happened, and for him it was a what if scenario, what if Glenn and Abe never died, in 801, we don't necessarily know if that's the case. We don't know if Rick is thinking about what could have happened and what life could have been like, or it could be that it's a flash forward and these things actually do happen, or it could be a dream sequence. Now, if it is a dream sequence, then it's basically the same thing, because we have Rick basically imagining or thinking about or dreaming about what could have happened if whatever happened during the war didn't happen, or something along those lines. And then we have this other shot with Rick and his eyes closed, and that's basically mirrored in this scene from 701, where we had Rick on top of the RV, and this was basically right after he remembered what had happened. So we basically, through Rick's eyes, saw what happened to Glenn and Abe. So again, just like before, we have Rick with his eyes closed in 801 and Rick with his eyes open in 701. And that's basically it. Now I'm going to go back and talk a little bit more about the dream sequence in 801 and 701 and compare them. However, my discussion from this point forward is going to include some recent spoilers that came out regarding a major death that we're gonna see. So if you don't know about that death scene and you don't know about that spoiler and you don't want to be spoiled, then leave the video right now, and that's basically it. Thank you for watching. But if things were spoiled for you, or if you want to know about that spoiler, stick around and then we're going to talk about that spoiler. So spoilers in 3, 2, 1. So the spoiler that I kind of discussed in my other video as well is that Carl is going to die sometime in season 8, most likely close to the mid-season finale. Now, what does that have to do with this dream sequence? So if you go back to 701, Rick was basically thinking about what could have happened if Abe and Glenn didn't die. And, Abe and Glenn were basically happy. They were at the table and they were basically enjoying themselves. And like I said, Abe and Glenn were there. So then, in similar ways, in 801, we have this kind of sequence as well. Now, if this is in fact Rick imagining life after the war and things that could have been, that means that someone that was in that sequence has died. Because if they haven't, then what's the point? Now, it could be that he's just looking at the community being bigger and them growing and everything, but it's also likely that someone from that sequence has died, because in 701, Abe and Glenn were there and they had died. So it's likely that whoever was there in the sequence has died as well. And if you take a look, we had Rick, Michonne, Judith, and Carl. Now for Rick, I don't think Rick is gonna die. And if it's Rick who is dead, we wouldn't be looking at the sequence through Rick's eyes, which is how it's presented. It could be Judith, Carl, or Michonne, but the most likely is Carl. Because if you go and take a look, Michonne was focused on, Judith was focused on. Carl was the only one that wasn't focused on. He just kind of passed in front of the camera and said something. And he wasn't the focus of that sequence. And I think they did that on purpose. I think them showing Carl in that fashion in the sequence is a big, big hint about his fate and what might happen. And if that's the case, then the scene with Rick, as he is basically shocked and he's distraught and everything, could very well be connected to Carl. And that could be the aftermath of Carl's death. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching. I'll be back for another super video.